I would bring him into Kensington Palace in the boot of my car or underneath a blanket in the back seat. Paul Burrell said those words on camera. Not reluctantly, not with embarrassment. With the matter-of-fact tone of a man describing a Tuesday evening. A routine, something that had become, over the course of nearly 2 years, simply part of the job. Drive to Chelsea, pick up the surgeon, open the boot, wait for him to climb in. Drive through the palace gates, wave to the officers on duty. Pull round to the back entrance, let him out. The police never stopped him, not once. Think about that for a moment. Paul Burrell, butler to the Princess of Wales, was driving a heart surgeon through the security gates of Kensington Palace in the boot of his car on a regular basis, for the better part of 2 years. The guards waved him through, the schedule carried on, the institution managed its public face, and inside the boot, covered in darkness and probably a blanket, was the man Diana had told Burrell was her soulmate, the man she loved more than any other, the man she flew to Pakistan for twice, the man she was willing to change her faith for, change her country for, change the entire shape of her life for. A heart surgeon from Jhelum in the boot of a palace car. This is that story, the full story, not just the car. The whole operation, the alias, the wig, the jazz club queue in Soho, the ironing board in Chelsea, the KFC on the floor of Kensington Palace, the candlelit dinners the chef was never told the truth about. The whole secret world that Diana built and maintained and protected for 2 years around the one relationship in her life that actually felt like her own. Everything in this script comes from documented sources. Paul Burrell's sworn testimony at the 2008 inquest into Diana's death. His account to documentary makers, repeated across multiple programs. Hasnat Khan's own 2004 police statement, read into the public record at the inquest. Khan's testimony about the specific details of their time together. Ken Wharfer's memoir, Diana, Closely Guarded Secret, and his subsequent interviews about the years he spent as Diana's protection officer. Biographer Tina Brown's The Diana Chronicles, built on years of interviews with the people inside this world. Christopher Anderson's research, based on hours of Diana's own recorded accounts. Nothing here is guesswork. Where the record is clear, it's clear. Where it is disputed, I'll tell you. Before we go further, if this channel has ever given you a Diana that felt true, take 1 second and subscribe. This is the version the palace never announced. Let's go back to the beginning, not to the boot of the car, to a corridor in a hospital on an afternoon that changed everything. September 1995. The Royal Brompton Hospital, West London. Diana was 34 years old. The divorce from Charles was not yet finalised. That would come the following August, but the marriage had been over in every way that mattered for years. She was living alone in apartment 8 at Kensington Palace. The boys were at school every other week. The structure the institution had given her life, the schedule, the official engagements, the managed calendar that had told her where to be every hour of every day since she was 20, had pulled away. She was free in the way that people are free when they have lost the thing that was both imprisoning them and holding them upright. She had come to the Brompton to visit Unag Tofolo, her acupuncturist and friend. Unag's husband Joseph had undergone triple bypass surgery. The lead surgeon was Professor Magdi Yaqub, one of the most eminent cardiac surgeons in the world. Assisting him was a junior doctor, a British Pakistani registrar with dark eyes, a heavy mustache, and the particular quality of concentration that belongs to people who have spent their entire adult lives becoming very good at something precise. He was doing his rounds. He came out of a door. He did not look up. He walked past Diana Spencer, the most photographed woman on earth, without adjusting his posture, without stammering, without doing the thing that every other human being in every room she had entered for the past 14 years had done the moment they registered who she was. He had a patient to check on. He kept walking, and Diana turned to Una Toffolo and said, under her breath, what she later described to the people who knew her, "Isn't he drop-dead gorgeous?" And then she noticed something that made her laugh. Written on the rubber sole of his white surgical shoes, in marker pen, was his name. The way junior doctors write their names on things so other people don't walk off with them. A grown man, scribbling his name on his shoes like a schoolboy. His name was Hasnat Khan. She came back the next day. She told Ona she wanted to check on Joseph. That was true. It wasn't the whole truth. She came back the day after that. And the day after that. For nearly 3 weeks, Diana found a reason to be at the Royal Brompton. She walked the corridors. She stopped by the ward. She was present in the specific, unhurried way that Diana was present when something had caught her full attention. Khan noticed. He said so himself in his 2004 police statement. He would have had to be completely blind not to notice. He just didn't do anything about it. He was focused on his work. He was uncomfortable with attention. He was, in his own quiet way, almost constitutionally different from every other man she had ever been near. And then one afternoon he mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that he needed to drive to Stratford-upon-Avon to pick up some books from his uncle's house. And he said something that surprised even him when it came out. He asked if she'd like to come. His own words from his police statement, "I did not think for 1 minute that she would say yes, but I asked her if she would like to come with me. I was very surprised when she said she would. She said yes, just like that, the Princess of Wales. Into a car. No security detail, no press pack, no palace schedule, heading to Stratford-upon-Avon to collect books. They drove out of London together. They arrived at his uncle Professor Jawad Sawid Khan's house, and Diana walked in and sat down as though it were the most natural thing in the world. No princess voice, no performance. She stayed for dinner. His uncle said afterward, "We never let anyone know that she was here." Not because Diana had asked them to keep it secret, because she had understood from the first visit that this man's world only worked if it stayed quiet, and she was willing to stay quiet. For the most photographed woman on earth, that willingness was the most radical thing she could have offered. After dinner they went to a small Greek restaurant nearby. The manager, Lazarus Seferidis, later described what he saw. Diana ordered moussaka. They shared strawberries. They sat at that table for 4.5 hours. He said they barely looked at their food, that they seemed more interested in each other than anything the kitchen sent out. 4.5 hours, no cameras, no chaperones, no schedule, just two people in a restaurant that nobody important had ever heard of, talking until midnight. That was the beginning. Not a state occasion, not a fairy tale opening. A drive to pick up books that turned into dinner and 4.5 hours of conversation and a woman past midnight, already knowing something had changed. But holding what had started required a completely different kind of work. Careful, deliberate, sometimes frankly absurd work. And the person who saw most of it, from the palace gates to the ironing board and everything in between, was a butler who would describe it under oath 12 years later. The first thing Diana did was create an identity. When she needed to call Khan at the hospital, she couldn't leave her name. The nurses on the ward would have known. Word would have spread. The tabloids had informants in every institution in London, and a call from Diana Spencer to a Pakistani heart surgeon would have been a story within 48 hours. So she became Dr. Armani. The nurses on Khan's ward had no idea who kept calling. They just knew that a Dr. Armani rang regularly and always wanted him specifically. Some of them probably wondered, in a vague way, who this persistent physician was. None of them thought, the Princess of Wales is leaving messages under a fashion designer's name. Khan confirmed it himself in his police statement and at the inquest. Diana used the alias consistently. She maintained it across the length of the relationship. The name that had gone on the royal wedding guest list, the name on the postage stamps, the name on the tea towels, that name she replaced, whenever she needed to reach the one person who mattered, with 2 words, Dr. Armani. It was funny, she knew it was funny. The woman who had danced with John Travolta at the White House was ringing a hospital and telling the nurses she was a doctor. She didn't care. Whatever it took. The wig came out every time they went somewhere in public. Not always the same wig. Dark, broadly. Oversized sunglasses alongside it. Though she knew well enough not to wear them at night. She had a system. Pull the wig on in the back seat of the car. Adjust it in the rearview mirror. Check the reflection quickly. Step out onto the street as someone else entirely. She had done it so many times it became routine. The way people become accustomed to routines that began as extraordinary measures and gradually turned into simply how things were done. By the middle of the relationship, the wig was just part of getting ready to go out. They'd walk through Chelsea together, Khan's neighbourhood, the streets around his flat, and the shops and the restaurants he went to after shifts. They'd queue outside Ronnie Scott's jazz club in Soho. Diana loved queuing. Khan described it in his police statement. She said you meet the most interesting people when you're standing in a line. She had dined with presidents. She had never stood in a queue in her adult life. Khan gave her that. Christopher Anderson, who spent years researching Diana and had access to her recorded accounts, described her sneaking into the hospital in the dark wig and sunglasses to watch Khan perform heart surgery. Just to watch. To sit in observation and see him doing the thing he was best in the world at. The most famous woman on earth, in a wig, watching a cardiac operation because the man performing it was the one she wanted. And there was the pub near Harefield Hospital where Khan had worked earlier in his career. They went together. Diana looked up at the sign above the door. The pub was called the Prince of Wales. She thought it was hilarious. Burrell was the architect of the palace access, not Diana Burrell. It was his car, his route, his knowledge of which gate, which guard rotation, which back entrance would ask no questions. The operation was simple in the way that only genuinely careful plans are simple. Burrell would drive to Khan's flat in Chelsea. Khan would get in. Not in the passenger seat, in the boot, or sometimes in the back seat under a blanket. The car would proceed to Kensington Palace. The gates would open for Burrell's vehicle, as they always opened for Burrell's vehicle, because Burrell was the butler and the butler's car went in and out of those gates every day without incident. Nobody ever stopped him. Not once in 2 years. Once through the gates and round to the back entrance, Khan would emerge from the boot into the private areas of the palace. The part the cameras couldn't reach. The part where the schedule didn't operate and the managed version of Diana's life didn't apply. And behind those doors, Diana became someone the public had never seen. Burrell described it at the 2008 inquest with the matter-of-fact precision of a man going through a procedure he had executed dozens of times. He would tell the chef that the princess was extra hungry tonight. Could he please prepare double portions? The chef never asked why. Chefs don't ask why when the princess is extra hungry. They prepare double portions. Burrell would set up the private dining room, candlelit, the full arrangement. He would then, in his words, disappear. His testimony on this point was direct and unembellished. I organized this thing, romantic candlelit dinners, telling chef that the princess was hungry, so could he do double portions. I'd do it all in secret and provide this world for them. I'd provide this world for them. A man of 40-something, carrying the weight of managing a secret that, if discovered, would have detonated across every front page in England, and he described his role in it as providing a world, not facilitating a liaison, not covering a security breach, providing a world, for two people who couldn't have one any other way. Those dinners happened in the palace, in the private dining room, with double portions from a chef who never knew who was eating the second plate, but they also happened differently, because Diana didn't only bring Khan to her world, she went to his. Khan's flat in Chelsea was, by every account, small and cluttered, a one-bedroom. The flat of a junior doctor who worked brutal hours and spent his non-working hours reading and didn't have a great deal of time or interest in the domestic architecture of the place where he slept. Diana cleaned it. Burrell said it plainly, in the specific way he said things, when he wanted you to understand that he wasn't embellishing. She would go to his dirty flat and do his ironing. She didn't do her own ironing, but she did Hasnat's ironing. Sit with that detail, not symbolically, literally. A woman who had had household staff her entire life, footmen, dressers, housekeepers, ladies in waiting. The entire infrastructure of a royal household stood over an ironing board in a cramped London flat, pressing the shirts of a man who had just spent 16 hours with someone's chest cavity open. She wasn't performing domesticity. She wasn't playing house. She was reaching, through every small ordinary gesture, for the thing that had been denied her since she was 20 years old. Ordinary life, shared life, the life where the schedule belongs to you, and not to an institution, and the person who lives across from you is there because he chose to be. She pressed his shirts. She cleaned the flat. She made it habitable for a man who was too busy saving lives to notice it wasn't. There is one image from this relationship that sits above all the others for what it shows about where Diana was happiest. An evening in 1996, Kensington Palace, not in the dining room, on the floor, cross-legged on the carpet in her apartment. No gown, no diamonds, no schedule, nobody official anywhere in the building who knew what was happening. Eating fried chicken from the box. Khan loved KFC. It was not a considered choice. It was simply what he wanted to eat sometimes after a long shift, and Diana, who had dined at state banquets in a dozen countries, who had been to every Michelin-starred restaurant in London, who had eaten with kings, was cross-legged on the floor of Kensington Palace eating fried chicken from a box because the man beside her wanted KFC. The television was on. Nobody was watching it particularly. Nobody knew he was there. The chef, who had prepared double portions on other evenings, was elsewhere in the building doing something else. The palace outside the apartment windows was carrying on with its business. And Diana was on the floor, happier than she had been in any other room that building contained. Khan confirmed the KFC in his police statement. It was a specific detail he remembered. Not the state dinners. The floor. The box. The ordinary. That was the life she wanted. And it wasn't available to her anywhere, except in a secret that required a boot and a blanket and a butler who drove with practiced calm through security gates where nobody ever asked the right question. Ken Worf left Diana's personal protection team in 1993, before the relationship with Khan began in 1995. So the direct operational sightline on the boots and the wigs and the Kensington Palace arrangements belongs primarily to Burrell. But Worf's account of Diana during the years he served her, 1987 to 1993, gives the fullest picture of who she was behind the managed version. And everything he observed in those years makes the Khan operation legible, in a way that pure chronology alone doesn't. Worf watched Diana navigate a marriage that was destroying her. He described across years of interviews and in his memoir, a woman who was fighting simultaneously against the institution and against her own exhaustion, who found release in small escapes, the unscheduled drives, the ordinary lunches, the moments when she could simply exist without the apparatus of royalty surrounding her, who understood that her protection officers were the witnesses the institution couldn't edit. He told the story of the 1989 party, which we have covered on this channel before, but he also described something broader about what Diana was doing in the years when she went toward ordinary life. He said she wanted to experience normal things, to stand in a queue, to order a drink at a pub bar, to walk down a street in a neighborhood where nobody expected to see her. Khan gave her every single one of those things. The pub where she ordered the drinks for the first time at the age of 35, and described it himself in his police statement, with the quiet specificity of a man remembering something that mattered. We once went to the pub together, and Diana asked if she could order the drinks because she had never done so before. She really enjoyed the experience and chatted away happily to the barman. She was 35 years old. She had dined with presidents, danced at the White House, been photographed in every capital city in the world. She had never walked up to a pub bar and ordered a round. Khan gave her the bar. He gave her the queue outside the jazz club. He gave her the drive to Stratford-upon-Avon, and the Greek restaurant, and the 4.5 hours, and the floor of the palace with the KFC and the wig in Chelsea, and the alias on the ward at the Royal Brompton. He gave her a life that felt like her own, and she protected it with the devotion of someone who understood, instinctively and precisely, that the thing most worth protecting is the thing nobody else can see. Burrell was not just the logistics, he was the witness. Paul Burrell had been Diana's butler since 1987. He knew the difference between the official version of her life and the actual version with a precision that no courtier, no protection officer, no family member could quite match. He was present for the machinery of the official version and for the unguarded moments behind it. He was the person she called her rock. When Khan was inside Kensington Palace, through the boot, through the back entrance, into the private rooms, Burrell was the man who had made it happen, and the man who managed the aftermath, who told the chef, who set the candles, who disappeared at the right moment and reappeared when needed. He testified at the inquest about the specific terms Diana used for Khan. She called him the One, not a name she used for anyone else before or after. Burrell said that Diana referred to Khan in those terms, the One, consistently across the years of the relationship, not as a romantic gesture, as a factual description, as the accurate name for a category that had one occupant. He testified about her asking him to explore whether a private wedding was possible. Burrell went to his parish priest, Father Anthony Parsons at the Carmelite Catholic Church in Kensington. Without Khan's knowledge, he made inquiries. He reported back. He testified about the depth of what he had witnessed. The princess said that this was her soulmate. This was the man she loved more than any other, not Dodie, not Charles, not anyone else. This man, who she had watched walk down a hospital corridor without looking up, who had his name written on his shoes, who drove her to Stratford-upon-Avon to collect books and spent 4.5 hours over dinner in a Greek restaurant, and gave her the pub bar and the queue outside the jazz club, and the ordinary Tuesday evenings that were the most valuable thing anyone had ever given her. Khan's own account in his 2004 police statement and in the documents produced at the inquest is one of the most quietly extraordinary first-person records in this whole story, because he describes the operation from the inside, not from the institutional distance of a biographer or the devoted perspective of a butler, but from the specific position of a man who was in the boot of the car and also in the candlelit dining room and also on the floor with the KFC and also, simultaneously, deeply uncertain about whether any of it could last. He described their relationship as a normal one, his phrase, a normal sexual relationship. Normal, as though normality were the thing he was most insisting on, the thing he most needed to assert about a relationship that required a butler, a boot, an alias, a wig, and an alias named after a fashion designer just to function. He was not wrong to insist on it, because from inside the relationship, from the perspective of two people who had found each other and were trying to build something in the only space available to them, it was normal. That was precisely the point. That was why she ironed his shirts and ate KFC on the floor and stood in the queue outside Ronnie Scott's in the dark wig, because inside those specific hours, in those specific spaces, it was normal. It was them. Unmanaged. His main concern, he told police, was that marriage would make his life hell. He knew he would not be able to live a normal life. If they had children, he would not be able to take them anywhere or do ordinary things with them. He had received death threats. Photographs of his face with a noose drawn around his neck, mailed anonymously. A man who saved lives for a living, being told by strangers that he should lose his. He was not wrong about any of his concerns, and he was not wrong to be troubled by them. But here is the thing. He was also, by Burrell's account, and by Rosa Monckton's testimony, and by the accounts of everyone who was close to both of them during those 2 years, he was also desperately in love with her. Burrell said it under oath. Not that Diana loved Khan, that both of them were desperately in love with each other. Desperately in love, and apart anyway. The end happened in 2 meetings in July 1997. Diana had come back from the south of France, from the Al Fayed yacht, and Khan felt something was different. He said it in his statement. He said when you know someone very well, you know when something is not right. They met in Battersea Park, neutral ground, a bench by the river, joggers and dog walkers and people who had no idea that the most famous woman in England was sitting 10 feet away. He sat with her and knew. The next day, at Kensington Palace, in the apartment where the candlelit dinners had happened, where the KFC had been eaten on the floor, where the double portions had been prepared by a chef who never asked why, Diana ended it. His words from the police statement. It was at that second meeting that Diana told me it was all over between us. She didn't explain why. She didn't cry. She just said it was done. And then he said something to her that he could not have known would carry the weight it would carry 6 weeks later. I remember saying to her at the time, "You are dead." He meant her reputation. He was warning her about whoever she had met on the yacht. He meant, if this is who I think it is, your public standing is finished. He didn't know how those words would sound on September 1st. Burrell testified about what came after. He said he was worried about Diana moving so quickly into the Dodi relationship, not because of Dodi, because of Khan. Because both of them were desperately in love with each other and apart anyway. And Diana was a woman in grief. And grief moves toward motion because motion feels like doing something when there is nothing to do. Rosa Monckton confirmed it from Greece, where she took Diana in mid-August, just days before Paris. Diana was not over Khan. She was grieving him. The Dodi of it was surface, noise, motion without destination. And in one of the last conversations Diana had with a friend that summer, weeks before Paris, weeks before the tunnel, she said what she always said when the subject came to its truest point. Hasnat is the one person who will never sell me out. He didn't. He never has. He turned down every offer. The book deals, the interview fees, the documentary proposals, decades of them across decades of being asked. Every time, no. He kept the secret. Not just the boot and the blanket and the alias and the wig, the real secret, the interior one. The one about who she was when the palace gates were behind them, and the wig was in her bag, and she was just a woman in Chelsea with a man who was walking her home from a queue outside a jazz club. He kept all of it, the way she knew he would. Leave her in the boot of the car, not as a metaphor, literally. Except it isn't her in the boot, it's him. He's in there, somewhere between Chelsea and the back entrance of Kensington Palace, in the dark, probably slightly uncomfortable, folded into a space that was not designed for a grown man, and definitely not designed for the dignity of a cardiac surgeon who had spent the previous 12 hours with his hands inside someone's chest. And Diana is not in the car at all. She's inside, waiting. Not performing waiting, actually waiting. The way you wait for someone you want to see, which is different from every other kind of waiting. Burrell will drive through the gates. The guards will wave him through. He will pull round to the back entrance. He will open the boot, and Hasnat Khan will emerge, slightly rumpled, into the private part of the palace. And Diana will be there. She will have planned dinner. Or Burrell will have organized the kitchen and disappeared. Or maybe it will just be the floor and the TV and the KFC, which is the version she liked best anyway. The version that felt most like what she was trying to reach every time she went to the trouble of any of this. Normal life. The ordinary evening. Two people, not performing anything, not being managed, not on the schedule, just present. Fully, actually present with each other in the only space in Diana's world where the management had not reached. She built that space one detail at a time. The alias, the wig, the boot, the back entrance, the disappeared butler, the double portions, the chef who never asked. She built it because the life she actually wanted could not be asked for through the front gate, could not be scheduled by the palace, could not be announced in advance and managed and accompanied by a press secretary and presented to 750 million people as a fairy tale. It could only be built in secret, in the dark, in the boot of a car, driven through gates that never asked the right question, carrying the most private thing the most photographed woman in the world had. The one person who would never sell her out. She was right about that. She was right about almost all of it. The only thing she was wrong about was the time. Thank you for staying with me through this one. The boot of the car is the detail that makes people laugh when they first hear it, and then sit quietly after the laughter, because what it actually describes is a woman of extraordinary determination finding a way to have the one thing the institution couldn't give her. Not a title, not a palace, not a fairy tale. A Tuesday evening on the floor with a man she loved and KFC, and no one in the world watching. She built that, one Tuesday at a time, for 2 years, in secret. And the man who was in the boot, in the dark, folded into the back of a car to get through the gates. That man kept her secret for the rest of his life and beyond it. Nobody who was ever given Diana's trust fully kept it, except him.